happening. Arendal Monitor 8s versus R5Ms, the final video of the two speakers that everybody told me I should only consider. Of course, if you've been on the channel, you know that I own the white speakers, the Monitor 8s from Arendal. And if you haven't been following the channel, you may not know that Perlisten sent me their R5Ms to literally go head to head. I asked them to send me them so that I can put them head to head against the Monitor 8s. And that's what we're going to do in today's video. We're going to start off the conversation by starting with some measurements. I did the review of the R5Ms prior to this video and measured them and talked about them. And I told you that I listened to them without room calibration. I just listened to them raw and I measured them without calibration. You guys told me that you wanted me to listen to them with calibration on and do some measurements with calibration and give you my opinions that way. So this will be that video. I'm going to tell you both speakers how they measured with room calibration and compare the two. Let's start off with the R5Ms. Alright, so I took some measurements of both speakers. We're going to start off with the R5M. So I did near field first, and I just measured the left speaker. And this is with calibration on, near field, a really good line. If you watch the review video, my previous video, they also measured very good without calibration. So it's a very good measuring speaker, sounds very good. Watch the review video if you guys want to know how I feel about this graph here. But we did the near field first, then I did the in-room response of, again, just the left speaker. And it stayed pretty nice, if not better, honestly. Again, this is calibration. Now, you guys, ignore this dip here. I struggle with a, what's it called, an SBDIF? I can't remember what kind of issue that I have, but it's a type of null that you get when your speakers are too close to the back wall or the side wall. So ignore this because I actually have that fixed with my subwoofers, but this is the response that I get in my seat with the speaker. So the orange is near field, the red is just the left speaker in-room response. The LNR actually looks like this, the average of the both. So the blue line is the frequency response that I get from 20 Hertz to 20 kilohertz with the R5M from Perlisten in my listening position with room correction on. It is a very manageable line. I can make this better. This is just anthem room calibration and nothing else with it. So here's the near field, just the left speaker. Here is the in-room response, just the left speaker. And then the blue line is both left and right turned on, all with calibration. Now, let's go to the near field left speaker of the Arendal. This one, this gets very interesting. So this is the Arendal's response near field with just the left speaker. Not as pretty. We got a lot of things going on here. I'm going to compare it to the R5M near field left speaker, and it looks like this. Now, this is at the same volume level. I have it on negative 30 dB on the Anthem Avian 70. So this is what the two look like. Orange is the R5M from Perlisten. The Arendal is the light blue. It should look like for you guys on screen. We have tons more output. Tons more. On average, we're at 81 decibels on the R5M. We are at 99 decibels, just about 100 decibels on average with the Arendal at the top. But the bass response here looks very similar, which is not true to the ear, but we'll get to that later. But there is a huge peak of mid bass on the Arendal near field. So let's compare the in-room response of the left speaker from Arendal versus the in-room response of the left speaker from the R5M. It looks like this. It looks very similar. Red is the R5M from Perlisten. The purple is the Arendal Monitor 8. And for the most part, it looks very similar. We have actually more dB out of the out of the R5Ms than we do the Monitor 8s. But check this out. Here's what I want to draw attention to. Look at the both extremes. On the bass side, in room on the left speaker, it's showing that I get quite a bit more, about 15 dB more of volume on anything 60 Hertz and lower on the R5M, the smaller speaker. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, towards the 20 kilohertz range, I actually get more output on the Arendal Monitor 8. Mid bass up in this region, it's all pretty much the same. but I'm getting more bass in my seat from the left speaker of the R5m than I am on the Arendal. Very interesting. We'll talk about that later. Now, let's look at the Arendal L and R response in room. So this is both speakers playing with calibration. This is what the Arendal Monitor 8s looks like. And this is very interesting. This is with calibration. But what's interesting is this incredibly quick roll-off going on after 100 hertz. This actually does not sound like this in my room. I actually have another graph of my speakers being set up where it actually stays flat down to like 10 hertz. I'll try to find that graph and pop it up for you because that's actually how it sounds. There actually isn't a huge roll-off, but mind you, I've been moving speakers around for the last 3 weeks, so they're not in the spot that they're supposed to be, and they're not on the stands that they're supposed to be. They are using the Perlisten stands that they sent for me to review. So both speakers were sitting on the same stands. The Arendals actually go on a taller stand, and that makes a huge difference. So, but how they are right now, they have a quick roll-off. Let's compare that to the left and right speakers of the R5m. Now this is interesting. We're showing that we get 30 more dBs of output. So this is more like a mic placement or a seating placement issue. Although the mic and the seat did not change places when I switched the speakers. They were exactly the same. So this is what the graphs look like in my room. Now this is why I love showing graphs and why I don't like showing graphs. The reason why I love showing graphs is because it shows us the science. It shows us the facts. This is what's going on in the room where you put that microphone at. Why I don't like graphs sometimes is because this does not sound the way that it looks. It shows that the R5m's have way more bass than the Arendal Monitor 8s, and if you look at them, you're gonna know that just can't be possible, and it's not. It's actually quite opposite. But what is true is that everything after 80 to 100 hertz is pretty much the same. It's really similar sounding, and in terms of frequency response, loudness, I will say. So that is all the speakers there. Interesting, right? But let's talk about what speaker actually is the better one. So I spent an extra day today listening to the Monitor 8s and the R5m's again with the same 4 or 5 songs. And I wanted to listen to them as critically as I could, and I wrote down some notes of what I was hearing, how I felt while listening to both so that I didn't forget them. So again, I used the same volume level, negative 22 dB is what I listen to the music on. I use anthem room correction in stereo mode, and I listen on Tidal. Most songs were in the max audio quality, some were hi-fi, so pretty good sound quality coming through. I use the same stands, so I use the Perlisten stands, which I think favor the Perlistens, but I use them in the same positioning, so both speakers were placed in the same spot, but I gave them their appropriate toe in, and then I came up to a conclusion on which speaker I thought was better. So let's start off with the Perlisten R5m's. So I put as a note, the Perlisten punishes you for bad placement. What I've learned is that there's a lot of mid-bass in this speaker, and if you have them too close to either a sidewall, the back wall, or both, like I do, you're going to have an accentuated mid-bass that's really going to throw you off because it's going to cause an imbalance. So keep that in mind. However, mid-range punch is wildly incredible. These speakers have so much mid-bass presence that it keeps up with your subwoofer, which I have that as a note down below. This mid-bass keeps up with the sub's low bass for a seamless blend, no gaps in the frequency. What I mean by that is there's so much mid-bass presence. First off, it takes you by surprise because it's way louder than you expect out of a speaker of this stature, but it has so much mid-bass that you can change your crossover on your subs to say 60 or 50 hertz and let it just play the lower end, and the blend is so good because it matches the volume level of your subwoofer. It actually is very pleasing, and I really enjoyed it. The next thing that I noticed is that the scale and dynamics are out of this world. The scale and dynamics that these speakers produce truly is out of this world. There are a few songs that I was listening to where I was like, dude, this sounds so much larger than it's supposed to. And sometimes it has you check in to make sure your other speakers aren't on. It's so wide, and my room's only 10.5 feet wide. It sounds wider than that, maybe another 4 feet wide. It's incredible what they do even in a smaller room. I still think this room is too small for them, but it is what it is. The next note that I have on here is on-axis listening is unmatched, but off-axis listening is equally as impressive. So when I do critical listening, of course I sit in my sweet spot centered between both speakers to give myself the best stereo imaging, but I purposely move myself to the left or the right to see how I feel about the sound when I move. And it is impressive how well the voices still find their way towards the middle, even if I'm not sitting in the middle. And then you don't lose a whole bunch of treble, a whole bunch of high end when you move to one side or the other. It still stays pretty linear, pretty exciting. And I really like that about it. So if you're going to use these and you may be off to the right, off to the left when you listen, or if you have multiple people who are going to listen and you're off axis, they're still a very pleasing treat to endure. I love that about them. Voices are crisp and beyond intelligible and always stay the focal point. Voices always stay the focal point. It doesn't matter what song that I throw at it. If it has tons of instruments and synthetic sounds and a voice, the voice always stays the focal point. Always stays just a little bit more forward than everything else. Again, it's impressive, and it's because of the technology that they have going on here. So that was my notes for that. I also put the song Weren't for the Wind by Ella Langley has this kind of echo chamber kind of effect. And the speakers take full advantage of it. In that song, she has some sort of like reverb in it that just makes a huge wall. And these speakers love songs like that. It takes full advantage of songs that have crazy space. Because the way that it takes a small room and enlarges it is, like I said, unmatched. It's unworldly. So songs like that really just make you smile, like, wow. But the Arendal is no slouch either. Let's talk about that one. So like I said, I listened to the same songs, the same 4 or 5 songs on the same volume level in the same spot and on both speakers. And here's what I got for the Arendal Monitor 8. So voices are centralized and nobody would complain about it, their stereo imaging, until you heard the R5Ms. The R5Ms, the smaller speaker, does stereo image. It does image better than the Arendal. Every song that I heard, minus a few, it always felt like the voices were more left and right versus centralized in comparison to the R5M. And I listened to the R5M first, then switched to the Arendal. So the R5M keeps more of what's important right here and then allows the instruments and the accompaniment surround you. The Arendals do that too, and they do it very good. But when you hear a speaker like this, you can tell the difference in the ability to keep the voices forward. So I made that note. The stereo imaging out of the Arendals is just a little bit worse than the R5M. The difference in sensitivity is small but noticeable. Arendal needs another 3 dB of volume on the volume knob to match the output of the R5M at the same volume, which is a big deal because of an increase of 3 dB is double the power. So these speakers, the big boys here, are a little bit less efficient than the R5Ms. It is not a huge difference, but this is a more power-hungry speaker, and you have to give it good power to get good sound and good volume out of it. And it's noticeable. Like I said, I use the same volume on the volume knob for both speakers, and you can instantly hear the decrease in volume level just from switching speakers. And that makes a difference. Yes, you can just turn the volume up a little bit, but you have to have a pretty strong amplifier to power these, where you may get away with, a mid-tier amplifier to power the R5M. It makes a difference. A 3 dB increase on the volume knob is like a doubling of power. So you can exhaust your amplifier faster, way faster with the Arendal if you don't have a good one. R5Ms sound more lively in comparison because of the difference in tweeter, but some may find the R5M bright in a room that's not treated or hardly at all. My room is pretty decently treated. I have 8 panels in here and a rug right now. And it's a good bit of treatment. I could use some more for sure. But I have a lot more than a lot of people do. And at first, when I plugged the R5Ms in, I felt like they were bright. Not harsh, but very bright, to where you just want to turn the treble down just a little bit. And I didn't. I left them at 0 on the knob. But if you have a room that's untreated or completely hard surfaced, like the floors and the walls have no covering, then you are in for a terrible sound. It'll sound nasty. These speakers have a lot of high-end register, which goes back to the chart, the graph. It shows, this is the wrong graph, but it showed the Monitor 8s having more higher register than the R5M. It is quite opposite. The R5M has a lot more, and it can be distracting if you don't have the ability to tame it. So keep that in mind if you're looking for a speaker like this. The time-aligned front baffle makes a difference on the Arendal 8. The R5M sounds shorter in height compared to the Monitor 8s, and that's simply because it's shorter by over 10 inches, and the tweeter fires downward on the Monitor 8s. Personally, I prefer this type of technology. So the tweeter is down here. It's in the middle of the front fascia. It's at the top of the Arendal Monitor 8s, and the Monitor 8s are taller by 10 inches or so. The Monitor 8s have a curved baffle because each driver is time aligned with each other so that it reaches your ear at the same time. I personally prefer either this technology or the height. I'm not sure if it's the time aligning or just the difference in height of the tweeter, but I feel like the Arendal Monitor 8s give you a better soundstage overall because of the height in comparison. I like the sound, the tallness of sound coming from the Monitor 8s. It is an obvious difference. Yes, the stands here have an angle, so you can angle them upwards if you want to. The R5Ms, which I think you should, because I didn't like them. They sit just a little bit below ear level if you don't have them angled up. I really like the sound stage that comes from the Monitor 8s with the height. Now, yes, I told you that the soundstage is very big and wide on the R5Ms and that they stereo image better than the Monitor 8s, but the sense of height on the Monitor 8s is better than the sense of height you get on the R5Ms, and I personally prefer that by a landslide. It was a clear difference, and I clearly liked it. It wasn't like, oh, I wonder which one's better. It was a clear decision for me in terms of height, which one was the better speaker, and it may just be because of the height difference. Now, the stands that I have my Monitor 8 sitting on right now are the R5M stands. The stands that I usually use are actually another 3 inches taller, so it makes a huge difference. Sense of height is a clear win for the Monitor 8s, but width and scale overall are much closer, if not similar. So that kind of just goes back to what I said. The sense of height is better on the Monitor 8s by a landslide, but all the other parameters are much more similar. Sense of scale, width, it's all similar. They both do a really good job. Anything under 60 Hertz is a win-win-win for the Arendal, and the quality of bass is gorgeous. So that graph showed you that the Monitor 8s had a clear roll-off after 100 Hertz. It truly does not. I don't know why the graph measured that way. If I haven't already, I'll pop the graph of how they sounded when I had them completely correct and time aligned and whatever. I had bass down under 15 Hertz and it did not roll off. It just kept going. And that's how they sound in person, in real life-like situations. The bass that you get on the Arendals, the Monitor 8s do not, or excuse me, the R5Ms do not hold a candle to it. It's not close. And not only is there more bass on the Arendal 8s, when it gets under 80, 70, 60, it's so tight. It's so subwoofer-like, like Speedwoofer 10-like, that it sounds so good. It sounds so good. So it's not just a lot of bass, but it's precision. It's tactile. You can feel it. It vibrates. It's really nice. It truly is really nice. Mid-range punch, however, is a cake for the R5Ms. Again, that graph showed that they're pretty even between 100 Hertz to like 15 kilohertz. They're they're even, it shows. But to the ear, the R5Ms have a lot more mid-bass presence in comparison to the Monitor 8s. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. It's an impressive thing for the R5Ms, but I feel like since there's so much accentuated mid-bass, that I think the Monitor 8s is a more balanced speaker, maybe more flat, if you will. Maybe. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. Like I said, mid-range punch doesn't hold a candle to R5Ms, but after running calibration on both speakers, it makes it a much more even battle. After running calibration, which is what the graph shows, is after calibration, the conversation is much closer. Calibration tames the mid-bass on the R5Ms, it leaves it alone on the Monitor 8s, and it makes it a more even battle, which I prefer the sound quality of the R5Ms after calibration opposed to before. The song Left Alone by Jimmy Heath and Cecile Savant, if I say that correctly, sounds better on the R5M simply because of vocal placement. R5M does a better job at giving you a phantom center. Monitor 8s can sound like two separate left and right voices, but could be my toe-in. More toe-in helped. So what I mean by that, the song that I mentioned there, Left Alone by Jimmy Heath, there's a female singing the entire song. It's a slow, lovey-dovey song for saxophone and a couple other instruments, but she's the focal, right? When I listen to the R5Ms with that song, the voices again stay right here. It sounds like one voice amongst a bunch of instruments. In that particular song, the Monitor 8 sound like two separate voices amongst other instruments. Even though I'm sitting in between both speakers and they're both the same volume, it still feels like I can hear both speakers separately, not together. And what I did was I got up mid-song and I towed the speakers in some more and fired them more towards me, and that helped. So I've messed up my system by moving my speakers out. Now I got to get it back together. But the R5M does put the voices more on center than the Monitor 8s do, at least with the songs that I listen to. I won't talk much on movie performance, but it's no surprise the Monitor 8s are the better choice. They just simply do everything better. I did watch a movie on both speakers. The Monitor 8s are just a better home theater performing speaker because of the sheer bass that they give. That is simply it. Sound quality, tonality is all there. It's all the same. But when it comes to bass and just punch and that, lower end, the Monitor 8s, it's a no-brainer. The song called Weren't for the Win by Ella Langley sounds so much more inviting and enveloping on the Arendal. I feel like I get a more wrapped around sensation with the Monitor 8s in this song and a lot of others, and it keeps you listening for longer. So that song, Weren't for the Win, that's the song that made me choose the Arendals as the better speaker. I think the Arendal Monitor 8s are the better speaker. And listening to that song on those speakers is what made the decision for me. What happened was, I like that song in general. I really like that song. I love everything about it. She sounds great. The song, the lyrics, I love it. And I listened to it on the R5Ms, and it sounded great. Again, voices were here. Instruments were tall. They were around you. They enveloped you. And then I switched to the Monitor 8s and listened to it again. And the sense of scale just grew taller, and it really changed my perspective on how I like sound. So I knew that the Monitor 8s, at least for me, were the better speaker because of just how much taller the sound is. They're both equally wide, but they're not equally as tall as each other. And I felt like I was getting more of a surround sound enveloping feeling on that song with the Monitor 8s than I did with these. And I think it's because these tweeters are literally pointed pretty much right at you versus the Monitor 8s. They sit taller than you and then they angle down and then they make their way towards you. It just, what it does with the room, it just floats behind you a little bit, and it's a sound that I just simply preferred. And it's not, I don't choose the Monitor 8s because they do things better than the R5Ms. It's just the way that it wrapped me was the win. It wasn't tonality. It wasn't the bass. It wasn't the mid-range presence. It wasn't anything of those kind of characteristics. It's simply how the speaker made me feel is what won it for me. I can't really say that the Monitor 8s do something better than the R5Ms, or vice versa. But the way that the Monitor 8 made me feel in that moment, it was over. I knew which speaker was the better one for me. There are things that I like about the R5M better. I really like the way that they handle voices. It's not particularly close. It's not a landslide. I don't want to say that. If I gave the voices 5 out of 5 on the R5Ms, I give it a 3.5 to a 4 on the Arendal. It's close. It's close. But the way that the Monitor 8s made me feel, the R5Ms never quite did. They're an impressive speaker, don't get me wrong. There's literally nothing wrong with them. But a good speaker makes you feel good. The music makes you feel good, but if the music sounds bad on those speakers, then it doesn't matter. The speaker made me feel good with that song, and so that's what won it for me. On the last note that I put on here, the subwoofer blend with the monitors is harder to do. But if you do it, I think it's the better overall speaker, like I just said. When you pair a sub with the R5Ms, it's magic. I don't think that I would listen to the R5Ms without a subwoofer, whether it was music and especially not movies. But even for music 2-channel listening, I totally prefer a subwoofer, a good subwoofer that's as quick, articulate, transient as the R5Ms are, because their mid-bass presence is not only boisterous, but it's also very tight, accurate, and fun. You have to have a sub whose low end is also tight, articulate, and fun. You got to pair those two together. And my subs are DIY, and I've calibrated the mess out of them and tweaked them 900 hours worth of tweaking, so they're dialed. And putting a quality speaker with them, it was the best blend I've ever heard. The Monitor 8s take a lot more effort to blend them in because they are subwoofer-like on their own. They give you so much bass that they rattle the room and the room next to you and the kitchen and the living room. They rattle everything because there's so much bass. And in this room, too much bass is a problem, which is why I actually have the Monitor 8s cross over at 120 hertz because they give you too much bass that they interfere negatively with the subwoofers that are in here. So the Monitor 8s are harder to intermingle with the subwoofers, but the R5Ms, it's nothing. It is butter. It is so easy. And I think that's intentional. It seems like Perlisten really wanted to give you some tight bass, 60 hertz on upwards, and then let the room fill in the lower half. They're only rated down to 37 hertz if you leave them unplugged with the port plug. If you don't plug the ports, you're down to 37 hertz and maybe a little bit lower in room. And I think that's Perlisten's intentions, is to let the room add the bass, not the speaker, and then focus on 70, 80 hertz on upwards. Monitor 8s will pump 20 hertz in, and then the room will excite that 20 hertz, and then you have too much bass, and then you have to take it away. So the Monitor 8s have too much bass, and you have to tame it. The R5Ms don't have enough bass, but the room adds a little bit more in there so that you keep a little more linearity in comparison to the Monitor 8s. So with what I said, I think the R5M is the better audiophile speaker. It's the better critical listening speaker, maybe the better reference speaker, but the Monitor 8s is the better speaker for the soul. It's the better speaker for the mood you're in. It's the better speaker for, I don't know, somebody who wants to come in and relax. And you can still listen critically to the Monitor 8s. You can. I just did it. You can, and it's fun. And they will expose your favorite artist and your favorite piece of equipment. They'll expose it. But the feeling that you get with the Monitor 8s, the R5Ms don't give it to you. It's too audiophile. It kind of takes the fun out of it. Does that make any sense? There's more character in the Monitor 8s, and I think a lot of people like that. I think people like a little bit of character in their speaker. For me, my heart goes to the Monitor 8s, but the R5m is a speaker that you cannot deny. The Monitor 8s are cheaper, by the way, a couple $100 less than the R5m. So take it for what you will. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave me a comment down below and let me know, do you think I'm just an idiot? If so, you can say that. Let me know why at least. But if you agree with me, also let me know why. Or if you have a totally different take, I want to hear yours down below in the comment section. Thank you to Perlisten for allowing me to keep these speakers for a month and critically listen to them. I couldn't have done it without your help, so thank you guys so much for believing in the K-Sky channel. It's time to pack them up and send them back. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already, and we'll see you in the next video. K-Sky out. Peace.